Welcome back to Sleepy Crime. Lay your phone to the side and enjoy tonight's story. Don't forget to subscribe for nightly true crime stories. Let's begin. The Night Clerk of Sycamore Hill. Part 1, The Whispering Ledger. In the quaint, wind-brushed village of Sycamore Hill, tucked between a lake and a thicket of pine, stood a forgotten boarding house called the Wexley Inn. It had once been grand. But by the year 1989, its carpets were worn thin, the brass tarnished, and its name only spoken in murmurs by the locals who still remembered its heyday. The innkeeper, a quiet man named August Lane, had been running the place alone for years. He was in his late 50s, kept his gray hair neatly combed, and always wore a navy cardigan, no matter the season. Guests rarely came anymore. Still, each evening, August lit the lanterns, recorded entries in the guest book, and turned down beds that hadn't been slept in for weeks. He moved through his routine with quiet devotion, as if waiting for someone, or something. One cold March evening, a young man named Eli Travers arrived just after dusk. He was thin, polite, and carried only a single suitcase. He didn't explain where he was coming from, nor how long he planned to stay. "I'd like a room overlooking the garden, if possible," he said softly. August blinked. "Of course. Room 3 has a view of the ivy wall." "That do?" Eli nodded. "Perfect." August retrieved a brass key from behind the desk, one of only 5 still hanging, and handed it over. The ledger lay open beside him, inkpot still full. "Just your name," August said, gesturing. Eli picked up the pen and wrote his name slowly, his hand trembling slightly. August watched the letters form, Eli Travers. Neat, careful strokes. Then, he turned the page toward himself and froze. He didn't say anything. Just stared at the page. After a pause that lingered too long, he looked up. "You've stayed here before," August said. Eli tilted his head. "I haven't." "You're in the book." "A decade ago." August turned, pulling an older ledger from the cabinet beneath the counter. He flipped through the brittle pages until he found the entry. Same name. Same careful handwriting. The ink was faded, but unmistakable. "That can't be right," Eli whispered. "I wasn't even," he stopped. "I wasn't here." August's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing more. He handed Eli the room key and gave a quiet nod. Later that night, long after the storm had rolled in and the thunder rattled the thin window panes, August stood at the front desk, staring at the guest book again. He ran a finger over the older entry. Then, slowly, he pulled out a yellowing newspaper clipping from a drawer beneath the counter. The headline read, "Local man vanishes from Wexley Inn, no leads in strange disappearance." Beneath it was a photograph. Eli Travers, dated exactly 10 years ago. Part 2, The Man Who Disappeared Twice. Rain tapped steadily against the windows of room 3, and Eli sat upright in bed, unable to sleep. The room was quiet, save for the rhythmic creak of the old building settling into the storm. The wallpaper peeled in thin curls near the corners, and the fireplace hadn't been lit in years. Still, there was a strange warmth in the air, as if the room had been waiting for him. On the nightstand lay the brass room key, resting atop a folded paper placard that read, "Welcome back." He didn't remember ever coming to Sycamore Hill, let alone this inn. He had no relatives in the area, no childhood visits. And yet, the smell of cedar in the hallway, the faint ticking of the grandfather clock downstairs, even the floral pattern of the hallway rug, it all stirred something too precise to be imagined. At midnight, Eli left the room. He padded down the stairs barefoot, the wood cool underfoot, and made his way to the front desk. August wasn't there. The guest book still lay open. Drawn by a force he didn't understand, Eli flipped back through the old entries. The ink blurred in places, but names and dates remained legible. Then he found it again, Eli Travers, March 13, 1979. Exactly 10 years ago to the day. A note was scribbled beside the name in a different hand, shaky, rushed. Checked out, unknown. Room still untouched. Key missing. Something rustled behind the desk. Eli leaned over and saw a small wooden drawer, slightly ajar. He hesitated, then pulled it open. Inside lay a worn leather journal, its spine cracked and faded with time. The initials ET were barely visible on the front cover. He opened the first page. The handwriting was unmistakable, it was his own. But the entries weren't familiar. March 14, 1979, there's something wrong here. I thought I came to rest, to be alone, but I feel watched. I hear things in the walls at night. The clerk, August, doesn't sleep. I saw him in the garden at 3 a.m., speaking to the sundial as if it could hear. March 16, I dream of a room with no doors. I wake up with soil under my nails. I don't know why I wrote that. I'm scared to leave, but I'm more scared to stay. Eli flipped faster, past dozens of entries, each one more fragmented and erratic. March 20th, I found a key in the fireplace. It wasn't mine. It was for room 0. There is no room 0. He froze. He looked again at the key from his own pocket. It didn't say 3. It said 0. At that moment, August returned from the hallway, carrying a silver tray with a teapot and 2 cups. Couldn't sleep, he asked quietly. Eli turned, trying to keep his voice steady. August, why does my room key say 0? August didn't blink. He merely set the tray down and replied. Because room 0 isn't on the map. Not anymore. But for some guests, it opens when it's needed. Part 3, Room 0. Eli stared at the key in his hand, the small bronze tag etched with a smooth, perfect 0. The number felt less like a label and more like an absence, a void. Something that shouldn't exist. I asked for room 3, he said slowly, turning the key over in his palm. You were given room 3, August replied, his tone calm. But keys have a way of shifting here, Mr. Travers. You're not the first. Eli opened his mouth, but stopped. Something about the old man's voice was neither threatening nor warm. Just factual. Like the ticking of the clocks lining the corridor behind him, constant, even, impossible to argue with. Where is it? Eli asked. Room 0. August gestured to the hallway that trailed off past the staircase, dimly lit by flickering sconces. Follow the hall past the library. Take the last door on the left. If the key turns, then the room has returned. Eli hesitated. He glanced down at the journal again, which now lay half open on the front desk. The pages rustled faintly, though there was no breeze. Something about it called to him, his own handwriting, written in a voice he didn't remember but somehow trusted. He took the key and walked down the hall. Each step felt heavier. The inn seemed to grow quieter as he moved, the silence pressing in like fog. When he passed the library, he paused. Its double doors were closed, but he could hear a faint scratching, like a quill on paper. He kept going. At the end of the hallway, the final door loomed. Unlabeled. Faded wood, slightly warped with time. A faint outline showed where a number might once have been. Eli reached for the knob and slid the key into the lock. It turned. The door opened with a long, whispering creak. Room 0 was nothing like the rest of the inn. It was immaculate, no dust, no cobwebs. A single candle burned on a table, though no one had lit it. The wallpaper was deep navy, patterned with gold shapes, spirals, suns, and clock faces with no hands. In the center of the room stood a writing desk. On it sat a second journal, closed, wrapped in twine. He stepped inside. The door clicked shut behind him, though he hadn't touched it. He stood for a moment, breathing in the scent of lavender and old paper. Then, he opened the journal. The first line was freshly written. "You've returned. Now let's finish what you started." Part 4, The Entries That Weren't Written Yet. Eli stared at the journal's opening line, the ink still glistening faintly in the candlelight. His name wasn't on the page, yet the words felt personal, like someone, or something, had been expecting him. He turned the page. More writing. Not in his hand. But it described him. His thoughts, his doubts, even the way he had walked down the hallway just minutes ago. He paused outside the library, uncertain. The scratching behind the door unsettled him, but he moved on. He is not ready to look there, not yet. Eli looked up, suddenly aware of the silence in the room. Even the candle's flame stood still, as if holding its breath. He flipped forward. He will open this journal. He will read ahead, tempted. But if he reads too far, he will forget who he is again. That stopped him. Again, he whispered. Then came another entry, written in a messy, desperate scrawl. "If you're reading this, Eli, stop. Please. You've done this before. Every time you open this book, you remember less. The inn wants you to stay. The room wants to be filled. It needs a guest. Don't let it write you in." Eli's fingers went cold. His eyes scanned the next paragraph, one he hadn't reached yet. He will be tempted to ask August questions. He'll think the clerk knows the way out. But August only tends the place. He doesn't leave. He never did. Not since 1951. Something creaked behind him. Slowly, Eli turned. August was standing in the doorway. "How long have I been here?" Eli asked, his voice low. August didn't answer immediately. His eyes drifted to the journal. "That depends on how far you've read," he said. Eli stood, trembling slightly. "You said I stayed here before." August nodded. "You said I vanished." "Yes." "Did I die?" August's gaze didn't falter. "Not in the way you're thinking. This place doesn't kill. It forgets. And in return, you forget too." Eli looked down at the journal again, then back to August. "Why me?" A long pause. "Because you write the story," August said quietly. "You always have. That's why the ink matches your hand. The room writes with you. And sometimes, it writes over you." Eli stepped back, heart racing. "I'm leaving. I don't care what this place is. I want to go." August didn't stop him. He just said, "If you leave, take nothing. Not the journal. Not the key. Not even the name you walked in with." And as Eli crossed the room, he noticed something carved into the inside of the door. A name. Etched deep. Eli Travers. Below it, scratched more faintly, a second line. Wrote himself in. Couldn't find the eraser. Part 5, The Forgotten Guests. Eli stepped out of room 0 and closed the door behind him with care, as though it might reopen on its own. The hallway was dimmer than before. The sconces along the walls had burned lower, casting long shadows that didn't seem to move when he did. He made his way back toward the front desk, journal still in hand despite August's warning. He knew he shouldn't be carrying it. He knew the stories written inside it weren't entirely his. But the pull of it, of knowing, was stronger than fear. August was gone. The ledger on the desk sat open, but several pages had been torn out. A scattering of names remained, written in differing inks, some in shaky hands, others bold and looping. Clara Winthrop, June 3, 1964. Benedict R. Chase, October 19, 1970. Helena Morey, April 5, 1982. Eli Travers, March 13, 1979. Eli Travers, March 13, 1989. The repeated name gave him pause. Was this some kind of cycle? Was he caught in a loop? Or were these different versions of himself? Thunder echoed faintly in the distance, but when Eli glanced at the window behind the desk, there was no rain. Just the garden, still and moonlit. The sundial stood at the center, surrounded by low shrubs. But something was wrong. The sundial cast no shadow. The moon was bright above. It should have cast something. But the dial stood as if frozen in time. He opened the journal again and turned to the next entry. This one was in yet another hand, delicate, flowing script. We've all been here, Eli. Some longer than others. Some didn't leave. Not because they couldn't, but because they didn't want to face what waited outside. Memory fades here, but pain fades too. That's the bargain. He turned the page. Taped to it was a photograph. Faded, yellowing at the edges. 5 guests stood on the front steps of the Wexley Inn. In the center, August, younger, smiling slightly. On the far right, Eli. Or someone who looked exactly like him. The caption beneath it read, "Our last spring together, 1959. Eli dropped the journal. The silence of the inn shifted. Not louder, but closer. Like something listening. Then the front bell rang. Just once. Ding. Someone was at the door. Eli turned slowly and approached. Through the frosted glass, a silhouette waited. Tall. Still. Familiar. He opened the door. Standing on the porch was himself. Not just a look-alike, him, but younger. The same anxious expression, the same suitcase, the same navy coat. And the younger Eli asked, "Hi. I'd like a room overlooking the garden, if possible." Part 6, check in again. Eli didn't speak. He stood in the doorway, frozen, watching his younger self wait on the porch. The same voice. The same request. Even the same worn suitcase with the broken leather handle. Younger Eli looked confused by the silence. "Is this the Wexley Inn?" he asked. "Yes," the older Eli finally managed. His voice sounded distant, like it came from someone else's mouth. Young Eli smiled faintly. "I wasn't sure it was still open. Hard to find on the map." He glanced back at the road, which even now seemed to fade into mist behind him. "There aren't a lot of places like this left." "No," older Eli said. "There aren't." They stood in silence. The inn behind him felt larger somehow, older. A building full of rooms and staircases and clocks that didn't always count time in the right direction. Somewhere behind him, he could still hear the journal's pages fluttering, though there was no breeze. Young Eli shifted his weight. "Could I still check in?" The older Eli hesitated. "Do you want to?" Young Eli furrowed his brow. "Yes. I think so." A pause. "Unless I've already been here." The older Eli stepped back, wordless, and gestured him inside. They crossed the threshold together. For the briefest moment, the air shimmered. Something turned slightly out of sync, like a gear slipping on a worn cog, but then everything stilled. Young Eli moved to the desk and glanced down at the open ledger. "Just your name," the older Eli said softly, instinctively repeating August's words. The pen was already in the inkwell. Young Eli signed. "Eli Travers. March 13th. Again." As he wrote, the older Eli looked at the wall behind the desk. The 5 brass keys hung silently. Now only 3 remained. Room 0's hook was empty. August appeared quietly in the doorway. His presence was calm, as if he'd been there the entire time. "You remember now," he said gently. Eli nodded. "I think I do." August looked at the younger version standing at the counter, studying the name he'd just written. That one's still you. But you're not him anymore. What happens next? Older Eli asked. That depends on whether you want to leave. Eli looked down the hallway, toward room 0, toward the library, toward all the spaces he had once wandered without memory. Do I forget again if I stay? August smiled. Not this time. You've read far enough to know how the story goes. And if you keep writing, it might end differently. Young Eli turned and asked, room 3 still available? Eli looked at August, then back at himself. And answered, yes. But maybe this time, take room 1. Part 7, The Archive Beneath. Eli couldn't sleep that night. Not the older one, he no longer thought of himself that way. Time, within the inn, had grown abstract, softened like old paper. Yet something new pulsed in his thoughts now, awareness. He stood outside room 1, where his younger self had quietly unpacked, oblivious to the loops they'd both walked. The door was closed. From within, faint murmurs, perhaps talking in sleep. Or perhaps reading from the journal again. The one Eli had left on the bedside table, knowing it would draw him in. He descended the stairs. The hour was late, though the clocks offered no agreement on how late. One read 2:17. Another, 11:41. One had stopped entirely. He made his way to the library. This time, he did not hesitate at the door. He pushed it open. The room smelled of old parchment and cedarwood. Floor-to-ceiling shelves loomed in dim lamplight, filled not with novels or encyclopedias, but with guest books. Hundreds of them. Eli stepped inside, running a hand along the spines. Each one bore a date stamped in gold, and beneath it, a single word, kept. He pulled one from the shelf. October 1926, kept. Inside, names. Notes. Journal fragments. Dreams recorded in multiple hands. Letters never sent. Another book. June 1943, kept. Inside, sketches of a room with no corners. Descriptions of voices behind walls. Signatures that faded before the ink dried. He opened a third, trembling now. March 1989, kept. And there it was, his name, over and over. Written with confusion, then fear. Then resignation. He flipped toward the back. A page was torn out. Eli looked around. The air in the library seemed heavier now, as though the room were listening again. From the far corner, a tall, narrow door emerged from shadow. He hadn't noticed it before. He approached, pulled the latch, and stepped through. Beyond it lay a spiral staircase, lit only by the occasional lantern, flickering in unseen wind. The steps led downward, deeper than any inn should go. Eli descended. The air grew colder. At the bottom, a vault-like room opened before him, filled with shelves of locked boxes. Filing cabinets. Typewritten reports. This was not the inn anymore. It was its memory. He pulled a drawer open. Inside were labeled folders, one for each guest. Clara Winthrop. Benedict Arc Chase. Helena Morey. And then, again, Eli Travers. 3 files. Each thin. Inside one, a note. Travers claims to have remembered. Allowing cycle to continue. Observing. The second. Travers deviated from room 3. Journal found in room 0. Potential instability in loop. And the third. Travers opened archive. Final phase beginning. Eli backed away, heart pounding. On the wall nearby, a large parchment was pinned under glass. A floor plan. The Wexley Inn. But below it, traced in red ink, levels 1 to 4, undocumented. Access denied. And a final scrawl beside that. The inn doesn't keep people. It keeps their stories. And when it runs out of room, it starts writing new ones. Part 8, The Room Beneath the Map. Eli stood motionless in the archive's low amber light, the weight of every unshelved memory pressing in from the shadows. The silence here was different, thicker. Not absence of sound, but a presence of watching. He stepped closer to the old parchment, the one marked, "Access Denied." There was something beneath the floor plan, partially covered by a warped piece of glass. He knelt and brushed the corner with his sleeve. A second sheet, faded but visible, was taped behind the main one. A sketched doorway. Below it, in uneven ink, "Room Psi, for what cannot be returned." He shivered. There had never been a psi on any key, any ledger, any guest book. A shadow passed behind him. He turned sharply, but the archive was still. Cabinets unmoved. The air, stale and ancient. He backed out slowly and climbed the spiral stairs again, one hand brushing the wall to steady himself. When he reached the library again, the lanterns had gone out. But someone had left something on the center reading table. A single key. Not brass, but silver. No number. No label. Just a single letter etched into the metal, "Psi." He stared at it for a long time. Then picked it up. The moment his fingers closed around it, he felt a shift, like the hallway behind him stretched impossibly long, like the walls of the inn were breathing. He returned to the front desk. August was waiting. "You found the archive," he said, not asking. "Yes." "You found your file." Eli nodded. "And the key?" He held it up. August looked at it with a strange blend of sorrow and respect. Most guests never make it that far. They leave before the inn starts remembering them. Eli leaned on the desk. "What is Room Psi?" August exhaled slowly. "It's the room not meant to be opened. Where the inn places things that don't belong anywhere else. Unwritten endings. Loops that broke. And I'm meant to open it. Only if you want to finish the story." Eli didn't respond right away. Outside, the garden had gone still again. The sundial remained unchanged, no shadow. August added, "You can return to room 1. You can forget again. But I think you've read too far now, Eli. The inn only shows that door to those who are ready." Eli took one final breath, then walked down the corridor for what he somehow knew would be the last time. He passed room 1. Then room 3. Then room 0. At the end of the hallway, a wall had appeared where none had been before. But in the center, tall and narrow, stood a black door. No knob. Just a keyhole. He slid in the key marked "Psi." The door opened without a sound. And inside was darkness. But not empty darkness. Listening darkness. And then, faintly, a voice. His voice. Saying something he hadn't written yet. Part 9, The Author and the Room. The black door shut behind Eli with an almost imperceptible click. He was alone now, though he could no longer tell how he knew that. There was no light. No shape. But he wasn't afraid. Not in the way he expected. The darkness wasn't empty. It was full, of pages, of voices, of timelines half-written and never completed. It buzzed faintly with memory, yet not the kind one recalls. The kind that recalls you. He took a step forward. Beneath his feet, no floor. Not quite. It felt like walking across bound paper, soft and shifting, like chapters waiting to be read. A glow began to rise ahead. A desk. Just like the one in room 0. Just like the one in the archive. Just like the one from before. Seated at the desk was a figure. Not August. Not Eli. Yet, both. The figure looked up and spoke with a voice that had no sound, yet echoed in Eli's chest like memory. You've written yourself into the end, Eli. But endings aren't what they used to be. He stepped closer. The figure's face was blurred, unfinished, like an oil painting never completed. But it wore Eli's cardigan. August's watch. Someone else's eyes entirely. You came to this inn to forget, it continued. But forgetting is never clean. The rooms absorb. The stories remain. The longer one stays, the more the inn writes them. Eli frowned. Then. What is this place, really? The figure gestured to the walls, which were forming now, lined with shelves. Each shelf stacked with versions of his own journals. Hundreds of them. It's not a place, the voice replied. It's a page. A blank one, once. But now, it's yours. Your loops. Your returns. Every decision you almost made. Eli looked down. A blank book had appeared on the desk. His name was embossed on the cover in faded gold. Eli Travers. Final draft. His hands trembled. If I write in this. The figure gave a slow nod. Then the story ends. Or begins again. But this time, by your hand. Not the inn's. A second chair slid out across from the figure. Eli sat. The pen appeared without being offered. His fingers closed around it. He stared at the blank page. Behind him, he could feel the door still open. He could walk back. Forget again. Let the inn tell the story for him. Or he could write. He placed the pen down onto the paper and whispered. Eli Travers checked out. The book closed. The black room vanished. And he awoke in room 1. Sunlight streamed through the curtains. No sound of ticking clocks. No whispering pages. Just a gentle breeze from the open window. The ledger downstairs had only one entry from the night before. A single name. No date. No key. Just E. Travers, returned to self. Part 10, the last entry. The sun rose slowly over Sycamore Hill, casting golden light across the ivy-laced windows of the Wexley Inn. The mist that usually clung to the road had lifted, revealing the winding path down to the lake. For the first time in what felt like decades, the inn was utterly still. No guests stirred in the rooms. No footsteps creaked across the floorboards. No pens scratched in the ledger. The air felt fresh. Empty, not with loss, but with peace. Eli sat at the edge of the garden, beside the sundial. He wore no watch. He didn't need one anymore. The sundial, he noticed, cast a shadow now. Long and slender. Pointing to the present hour. He touched the stone with a flat palm. Warm from the morning light. In the distance, a car passed by, slowly. A sound not often heard on the quiet roads beyond the inn. And he smiled. He didn't need to stay. He had chosen to. Not as a guest. But as someone who remembered. Later that day, he returned to the library. Not as a searcher, but as a keeper. He pulled a fresh ledger from the shelf, sat at the central table, and opened to the first page. With careful, steady hand, he wrote. Volume begins, August 4th. The inn is quiet. It has let go of the old stories, and now waits for the right ones to arrive. Should anyone find this, know this, you are not lost. You are being read. And you can choose how the next page turns. E.T. He closed the book gently and placed it on the counter where the clerk once stood. As he turned away, the wind stirred the edge of a doily. And from deep within the walls, somewhere between the halls and the stairs and the time-stitched spaces, the softest sound echoed. Not a whisper. Not a footstep. Just the closing of a story.